So thank you so much for joining us for Impact State of Mind. I'm John Paul Parmigiani, CEO and co-founder of Impact Hub New York Metropolitan Area. Impact Hub New York Metropolitan Area is a nonprofit supporting entrepreneurs and change makers through programs designed to help impactful ideas succeed. Impact State of Mind is a virtual series created to support and connect the impact community during the COVID-19 crisis, which, as we know, is ongoing. So thank you so much for joining us for today's session, which is Meet the Innovator, Archana Shah, who is one of our dear co-founders and COO of Impact Hub New York Metropolitan Area, a real superstar, and it's very exciting to be here. We also have with us today, who will be hosting the conversation, Karen Brown-Stovell, who is one of our other very dear and amazing co-founders of Impact Hub New York Metropolitan Area, as well as Executive Director of Forward Ever Sustainable Business Alliance in Newark, New Jersey. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to pass it on to Karen and Archana to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, JP. How are you?
Thank you.
Good.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I have been looking forward to this moment for a while now. And we want to be conscious of everyone's time and make sure that we get our full half hour in. So we're going to just jump right in. Of course, I know you, but I want everyone else to know the wonderful Archana, and you know, beyond the title of COO, because that's a heavy title, you know, Chief Operating Officer. How would you describe yourself outside of that very, very illustrious title?
Yeah, thanks, Karen, and thank you for taking the time. And I'm just going to do a quick shout out to some of the attendees that are friends of mine that are here. Hi guys, thanks for joining. So who am I? And I remember you asking me this question in several conversations, and it's always intrigued me because we sometimes introduce ourselves, like you said, with our titles. And co-founder and COO doesn't really mean very much. In the work I do, or we do, I should say, it doesn't mean anything really. But who I am is I've decided I'm a work in progress. I'm a work in progress in many, many different ways. I have to reduce my ums, I know. And the way I think about it is I have a very, very strong affinity or passion for economic justice. It's probably the core of what I really strongly believe in. And it's a holistic approach to that. And it comes in many different forms. And so I see myself as a work in progress towards becoming a better advocate or supporter of initiatives towards economic justice. So what that means is supporting initiatives, being part of processes that really help in that space, because I think of economic justice as one of many pieces that work towards improving communities and helping alleviate communities, creating more equality across different, however you want to measure equality. And so I see myself as an advocate for economic justice and supporting whatever initiatives or programs there are that would help towards that goal.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Share a little bit about your career, if you don't mind, prior to coming on board here, that led you to, led economic justice to being a part of you versus previous career working in banking and finance.
Absolutely. It's very non-traditional. And I don't know that there is a traditional path to this, but I see this as a culmination of so many different opportunities and experiences that I've had in my life, starting from growing up in Tanzania, which was at the time that I was growing up there, for lack of a better term, largely socialist. And seeing public sector fail in such a, just across the board, I think that's the only way to put it, public sector fail, had a big effect on me. And it's only upon reflection that I realized how much of an effect it had on me, because as I left Tanzania to go to college in the US, I was very, very focused on the private sector. I was very unnerved, if you will, almost by the public sector and even charitable organizations and philanthropy. I didn't think that they were, quote unquote, the solution for anything that I believed in or thought about. So I made a very strong effort to focus on the private sector and thought of that as the only place that I could actually get something done if I wanted to do anything. And I've always been a very practical person from that perspective, which is why the COO title fits me very well. It's about organizing and getting things done.
Yeah.
So I think that led me to, I think, a career that initially has been very structured, very almost rigid, if you will, and very single-mindedly focused on checks and balances, P&L. You either win or you lose. It's a zero-sum game. Exactly. There's one way to look at things, and that's what you do. And I don't put that down and think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think it was a great training ground for me. I became very disciplined in how I approach things and very focused on what needed to be done.
Yeah.
But it had a limit because it wasn't ultimately fulfilling this passion I have for economic justice. And I will admit, at the time, I had no words. I didn't know what this language was. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't actually know what that was. I just knew that this wasn't enough. But what it did teach me, and I'll stop from here, what it taught me was this was a great tool to use for something, right? Capitalism and business and the private sector is a great tool. And if I intimately understood it as I had gotten to understand it over the 20 years that I worked in finance, this is something I could take and go and use to do something else. And that's, the privilege, and I think you coming from the private sector, also the privilege of working in the private sector at some point is that you can make other choices, right? You can take other options if you choose to. And that's when I decided that I really wanted to pivot the next sort of stage, if you will, of my career into something that was focused more on, for lack of better words at the time, capitalism for good. I wanted to do something better with it. I didn't like where it was leading me. It wasn't enough. And that's where I ended up joining a microfinance organization to be part of their development team as it was launching in the US. I became part of a nonprofit organization, a chapter of a nonprofit organization called Women Advancing Microfinance, and really dove deep into, so this is one area of financial access and economic justice that felt like it tied in with my experiences and my skills, but also fed into my desire to kind of be that advocate for economic justice.
Yeah, I get that 100%. So, it's funny, I was having a conversation with a college friend of mine who similarly, when you were speaking, similarly described how she had grown up in the Netherlands and other places and had gone, the traditional route after school. And then, thinking, well, we've seen how government works, especially now, right? A lot of people have had their thoughts over many years that the inadequacies of how government works, and so we shift to thinking corporate America, if you will, is the answer. But I think what I got from what you were saying is that being able to glean best practices, foundational best practices from the private sector, and then sort of merge those and connect those with sort of connecting the dots or bridging the gap is what is needed. But who's there to do it? And so it takes someone like yourself to be able to recognize that that path could be actual, that there is a path like that, right? And to choose that path. Was that something that came, was that something that was intentional? Were you guided to that? How did you know about, because a lot of times when we talk about this space, social impact, new economy work, microfinance, that's in and of itself, a lot of people aren't familiar, right, with those terms, with that space. How did you come to know about this in order for you to feel like there was space for you to make a difference?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. I've always been really intentional in decisions that I make. I'm not saying I make them easily, but I make them very intentionally. And as I was leaving banking to get onto this journey that was going to be somehow marrying capitalism with impact, again, still didn't have the words. I wanted to develop credibility, right? I didn't want to tout myself and say, oh, here I am, this like perfectly skilled person. I'm going to come in and fix everything and do everything right. So it was really about developing credibility. And one of the ways I got guided, and I have to say one thing, a shout out to so many people who were so generous with their networks, with their introductions, with their time to guide me in different directions so that I had a sort of a holistic view of what this was, rather than a very single-minded, structured view that I had come in with, because that's just how I was trained. You know, professionally, that's how I was trained. You take a path and you go on it. And I think with this exploring this space and taking that time to explore this space really helped me understand that it's not black and white, it's not right and wrong, but that we have to work along that spectrum. I will also shout out to a very supportive family that indulged my, if you will, almost identity crisis at one point, to say, this is not who I want to be. I want to be something else. I don't know how to get there. I don't actually know what that is, but I know what it looks like. And I'm going to figure out a way to get there. And I have to give credit to a really supportive family that not only supported me, but believed in me more than I probably believed myself at the time. So I think through that exploration and being patient, I was able to develop skills that for me meant developing credibility in the space. So I started in this microfinance organization for a year. I was working very closely with this chapter, nonprofit chapter of Women Advancing Microfinance, and I got to meet a ton of people, do a lot of really good work there. And then I ended up working at a university Center for Social Entrepreneurship, which was another place to really develop skills in program development and management and things like that. And that built to kind of this opportunity that we're at here, and meeting people and understanding the work that is Impact Hub and why we're doing what we're doing. So it's really a journey, but definitely a very generous journey of to benefit me, but through the guidance of a lot of people.
And would you say that journey, you know, because I don't know about you, it seems to me that from, you know, getting to know you over this year or so, that it was deep down inside, probably, like if you were to talk to your 15-year-old self, would she have known, or would she be surprised that you're here right now? Because I don't think so.
I think, you know, it's interesting. I don't think so either. But
it's not usually the path that you think, but
exactly. And I think, and I don't know that it's unique to me. I think it's unique to, I mean, I think it's common to a lot of us. You know, you kind of go to grade school, then you go to high school, then you go to college, because that's what you do. Then you get a job and you make sure that, you know, you're secure and you're stable, and then you know, do other things. I've always been kind of chronological in what I've done, and always want to make sure that certain pieces fit together. Like financial security was really important to me. Supporting my family was really important to me. All these pieces had to be in place before I felt like I could take a next step into something else that was less stable and less secure, maybe. But again, all these are concepts in your head, right? And I think as I've gotten more experienced, I won't say older, but as I've gotten more experienced, I think I've had the ability to be more, like I said, less black and white and more thoughtful about what it is that I am doing and why I'm doing it. And then it doesn't mean if you do this, you have to give up this, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that, I mean, I still fall into that trap. I think my husband will be the first one to tell you that I still do, but I'm able to sort of talk my way out of it a lot more now.
Yeah, self-talk is sometimes we have to have our support systems in place. Even when we are at a certain level in our career, we always need that opportunity to take a step back. So that you know, there's two things that I wanted to bring up. How has being a woman of color affected any of it? Was being a woman of color a woman of color that grew up in Africa. That's right. Um, does what we're talking about now, has any of that informed the way in which you decided to take your path, whether it be chronological or, all the things that you just said. But how has that impacted you? When we talk generically about the same path, but sometimes I know, being a Black woman myself, it's a different caveat that we don't share. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, that's a great question that rarely I actually reflect on. And it's not because I'm naive about it. I think I was really naive about it until maybe quite late in my career in banking that I first encountered it and realized that merit was not the only metric if I wanted to get further ahead. And I will say that that was a huge wake-up call, and it was very frustrating because as far as I was concerned, nothing had changed except for the fact that suddenly I was a woman, and I was a woman of color in a place that maybe I didn't belong, according to who knows what and who, right? Doesn't matter.
To the environment, to what you see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was very, very frustrating for me. It was extremely frustrating for me. But I think the consciousness kind of came then. Realizing that was actually a real barrier in a way. And it also was a conversation to be had with myself about, was it worth it? And I still sometimes wonder, did I justify it because I wasn't willing to fight? Or was it just not worth it? It doesn't matter anymore. But what I do want to say is one of the things, and then, you have different experiences in different spaces. It's not like the philanthropy or the nonprofit or the social impact space is colorblind or gender blind, right?
Yeah.
I always say the moment you have a group of human beings, there's going to be that. You are going to face microaggressions, and this is something you taught me, the word and the terminology. You're going to face biases, and that's just part of humans, groups, and organizations, right? We have to accept that. But what I find is such a privileged position that I sit in right now, and I've talked to our other co-founders about it, and maybe not specifically to you yet, is building an organization from scratch is a choice that we can make on how we observe our culture and how we interact with other people. And if there are things that I didn't like about the way I was treated, or I saw other people being treated in organizations that existed, it is my responsibility, is our responsibility to make that change. It's harder because you fall into patterns. Things are busy. You want to get things done, but it's always important to think back and say, am I being X, Y, Z? I don't want to use generic terms like inclusive and accessible, but am I being the person that I would like to be treated as? And it's hard. I'm not going to say it's easy. But I think what I really feel privileged by is that there's a like-minded group of people amongst us that keeps us in check, I think. We speak up when we see what we don't like, and we talk each other down from, sort of frustrations and ledges when we feel like, oh, something's not happening in a way we feel is important. And I feel very, very respectful of that. But this is very important to me in the culture of the organization we're building.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and as you were saying that, all I could think about is that, depending upon how people feel, it's like, there's a saying that I read years ago that said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Right. And I think about that in the sense of just life in general. When you are ready for the positioning that you say that you're ready for, the opportunity will appear. And so it is not a coincidence that you're in this role right now after having prepared, made those decisions, pivoted, and then this opportunity appears to you, and you're perfectly positioned. And although you may not have everything perfectly figured out, you are perfectly capable of taking all the information that you've gleaned from all those spaces to be able to inform this space to be the COO. So I'm going to ask you this one last question, and if people do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. You know, oftentimes we have these kind of conversations and it's all the way up here and it's, oh, everything's great. And, you know, like it's not, right? Right. It's not, this does not come without sometimes, you know, self-doubt, all those kinds of things that we all feel that we don't talk about often. So what is the practice that you practice that keeps you sane, that keeps you grounded, that you can share with everyone?
Absolutely. I'm going to shout out again to my husband, who is an in-house therapist for me. We take a walk every morning, and there was a bench we always sit on. Not because I get tired, though maybe I do, but more just to sit and have a chat. It sounds totally silly, but it's a practice that I really I look forward to. It's that morning you have a clear head, and you just sit and you talk about something, and you realize it kind of isn't as big a deal as you think it was, or there's a perspective that you kind of missed, or you're so caught up in the minutia you forget the big picture, whatever it might be. And we reflect on that, and we have really open, honest conversations. And that's literally therapy for me. Outside of that, talk about, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher comes. I come from a culture where yoga meditation is inherent. I've seen my family, you know, my mother be part of, you know, that practice for decades, but I never adopted it until I would say maybe about 5 years ago, where I took it on. It was getting kind of creaky and my muscles were aching, and, you know, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try this yoga thing again. And took it from a very, it's my physical sort of exercise routine. Took it from a very literal perspective. This is great exercise for me and I should do it. But it's been transformative, and I don't want to sound like someone who's like touting a particular way of life, but it has been truly transformative in keeping me sort of grounded, keeping me physically feeling good, really helping keep my mind focused as opposed to wandering off into scenario analysis that, you know, is crisis every single moment. And especially in a year like this, I would say I miss the yoga community that I was a part of because we can't get together. But my home practice is something I truly rely on and really have adopted as an integral part of my life. And that's been key.
And is that something that you and I would invite you to, if you want to share any resources with people, because I do think that as we all go through our journeys, going through this very difficult time we're going through now, that we somehow or another implement whatever that is that will bring you joy, whether that be taking a walk with your partner, sitting on a bench, or, you know, doing some kind of practice. I personally do Pilates every day. If I didn't do it, I don't think that I would, you know, like yourself, the aches and the pains and all that stuff, I wouldn't be the person that you see before you, right? I think it's important not just to do something, but to take that time for yourself, that half hour, whatever the time is for yourself. So is there recommend, and then I have a couple of questions.
So there's tons of resources, and what is great about this community that I'm part of, and that many of us are part of, it's very generous. So there's lots of people on Instagram that are offering free classes and resources. There's really affordable resources online. I'd be happy to share them with, you know, anybody who would want to. So absolutely, there's a lot.
Okay, so I do have a couple of questions. We have about two minutes or so. This question says, I have finally reached the financial level that creates the security and comfort my family has needed me to provide. Does a change into an impactful life mean having to sacrifice some of the family's happiness in order to be impactful socially? And then one other question is, what is your impression of the social innovation ecosystem in the New York metro area? And What can be learned?
I'll answer the second one first, and then I'll go to the sort of the more personal experience one. To the second question, what is my impression of the ecosystem? I think it's a lot more fragmented than I expected. It's not to say there aren't resources everywhere for everybody, but I think the accessibility of them varies depending on communities and neighborhoods. And so I think what I'm realizing and learning is that even though we all preach our mission of inclusivity, of accessibility, many times when we're encountering partners in the ecosystem, it's actually not the same. It's quite fragmented. And I know this is a romantic notion, and I acknowledge that. But I think something that could be done where if we're all working towards a similar goal, let's leverage each other and let's really work towards that. And to making sure that resources that are fragmented all over are well known to the communities all around us that can access them and know about them in a more equitable manner. So that's my sort of short answer to that question. I have a lot more thoughts about that, but I'll stop there. To the other question about social impactful life and happiness, I would say I am happier now than I ever was before. And I'll tell you why. I get up because I'm excited to do what I do. I get up because I feel like it matters what I do. And I think sacrificing happiness to me is a very deep question. Is what is happiness for you is really what you need to define, right? So financial security was something that was like a very important piece for me. And happiness was not defined by how much money I have or how much material goods I have. Happiness for me is about my social structures, is about my engagement with people, is about yoga, quite frankly, and all those kind of things. So for me, I feel like I have much more control over my time. I can do what I want to do when I want to do it in a way. And honestly, the happiness for me personally, and it reflects on how I interact with my family and my friends, is because I'm happy doing what I'm doing and truly joyful and passionate about it.
Yeah, I can echo that as well. It reminds me, and we're going to go over just a couple of minutes. It reminds me a long time ago, I read a book called The Art of Selfishness, and it's the exact opposite, right? It's basically saying, put your oxygen on and then assist. Right. Mm-hmm. But it also speaks to the fact that in order for you to be happy and giving and be fulfilling to family and all those things, you have to also feed the engine, right? In order so that the engine can continue to move and do all the things that it needs to do in order for the family to run, meaning the woman, in this case, this person, or the person being the engine, if you will. So I would encourage everyone I would discourage, I would say, anyone from thinking that taking time for your own personal practice takes away from your family, right? It puts fuel back in you so you can give more, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the last question will be, what part of the work with the Impact Hub has meant most to your passion to make a difference? And what have you witnessed during the crisis that you feel your work can address?
Okay, so what is the work of Impact Hub for me? Again, it goes back to the fact that at the core, what we are trying to do is create a little more of a just society, right? Economic justice is one piece, but if we can talk about racial, if we can talk about health, if we can talk about all the other pieces that make us a healthy community, this is one piece of it. But at the core, that's what we're doing. It's just we're doing it in different ways. We call it different things, programs, events, workshops, sessions, whatever you want to call them. But that is our goal and that is our mission. And that, to me, it drives me. And that's what makes me really happy. I think what the crisis has shown more than anything is that these gaps are big and wide. and really there's an urgency to address them. I love this city. It's my adopted city. I'm passionate about it and I love it. And to me, seeing it thrive economically again and as a community is so incredibly important and so personal that I can't wait to be a part of that.
On that note, absolutely, absolutely. And if it's not, and if it's not, if it's lost on anyone, the fact that you do get up every day, right? And you're passionate about your work and you take the walk and you do the things that you do to inform yourself to be your best self, it is absolutely necessary so that you can show up and do this work and connect those dots and create those bridges so that it won't be as disjointed anymore, and so that we can really continue, you know, after the pandemic to really build upon this time and to really, you know, see the city come back even stronger than ever. So having said that, I thank you for your time. This has been a great conversation. Hopefully we'll do it again soon. And I thank everyone for showing up. Thank you so much for joining Impact Hub, Impact State of Mind, and my conversation with our CEO, Archana Shah.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good time. Good night.